They're running the country. And now they're taking over our news media so that we will, so that they can, number one, hide news and information that's unfavorable to them. And number two, promote their own worldview and call it news. More importantly, I think, is this situation with Warner Brothers Discovery. This is the company that owns both HBO, but in my mind, more importantly, CNN. And I mean, this is what happens with media consolidation. The Trump administration is no longer enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act or the Clayton Antitrust Act or the Antitrust Act of 1957. They're just not doing it. They're letting these companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the result of this is that right-wing billionaires are coming in and just buying up media. I mean, David Ellison, the son of Larry, the second or third richest man in the world, is looking at having his company Skydance, which bought CBS and put Barry Weiss, the right-wing crank, in charge of CBS News. They're reporting she's got a security detail of 6 people, because right-wingers are just so frightened all the time, that he's looking at buying CNN. I mean, not specifically CNN. He'd buy Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns CNN and HBO. And then he'd have 2 legacy news brands. This is not just the problem of media monopoly. This is a problem of monopoly in general. Monopoly, I wrote a book about this, The Hidden History of American Monopoly. Ralph Nader wrote the foreword for it and said it was the best book on monopoly he'd ever read. And it's a crisis, monopoly. In the United States right now, we've got, basically 4 or 5 banks control the majority of banking in America. 4 or 5 oil companies control the majority of, fuel, or fossil fuel companies control the majority of fossil fuels in America. 4 or 5, pick an industry. 4 or 5 companies control the majority of retail in the United States, Amazon, Walmart. You've got a handful of hotel chains own the majority of hotels in the United States. A handful of airlines own the majority of airlines in the United States. A handful, just a tiny handful of cell phone companies control the majority of cell phone coverage in the United States. The handful of companies that can, that offer internet service control. And what you end up with in a monopoly economy is, again, oligarchy. Where, this takes us back to my opening rant this hour about how, oligarchy is like this transitional form of government that eventually the people rebel against, and then either the oligarchs respond by giving in and going along and breaking up like they did in 1933, or they squash you like a bug. And we're in the squash you like a bug mode right now. These oligarchs, these giant corporations, they've got enough money to bribe Donald Trump. They've got enough money to buy the entire Republican Party and half the Democratic Party. They get their way in Congress no matter what happens. They get their way in state houses no matter what happens. They can intimidate cities and counties and states. They're running the country. And now they're taking over our news media so that we will, so that they can, number one, hide news and information that's unfavorable to them. And number two, promote their own worldview and call it news. This is, Warner Brothers mentions that they received unsolicited bids, right, from a whole bunch of companies. But this is from David Zaslav, who's the president and CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery. But this acquisition, in particular of CNN by David Ellison, would be very concerning. And yet, I'll bet it happens. I'm guessing it's going to go, it's going to roll right along.